You're pretty young, right? So when did you start, getting involved with, hacker groups and open software and all that?
So when I was young, I always felt passionate about like many different things. I did lots of sports. I read a lot about science. At one time I wanted to be a paleontologist, and but I always felt like a passion for technology, and it was always something that really interested me. And it started off like when I was in school. I started to try and I saw that the computer systems were restricting people, and this became like a challenge to me that I wanted to start break into these. And
How old are you?
maybe like 12 or so. And so this like started off like many years. I was constantly always trying to break in and destroy them and so on. And like it started off, okay, you're banned from the computers for like a week, then a month, then a year. Okay, you're banned forever. Okay, you're not allowed to be on a computer. You're not allowed to be in the same room as a computer, but each hacker is stealing people's accounts and getting on, right? And then you're not allowed to be on the same floor as a computer, and not allowed to look at a computer. And then I got suspended and then expelled from the school. Yeah, because like at the end was like when I finally cracked everything and took all of the restrictions and gave everyone in the school unlimited space and removed the restrictions on the websites people can visit. I always hated authority. And this was something I always fought against. But then I left school and I went to college instead, and the teacher said to me, oh, you can't do maths because it's too difficult for you. And I ended up getting like one of the best marks in the country, like 100% on my core maths. And then I really wanted to do maths at that time in my life, but the best advice I could give you is never ever listen to anything anyone ever says in your life. It's always do what you want, right? And people at the time were saying to me, oh, Amir, you're good at computers, you should do computers. So I went and studied computer science, and I was like, this is shit. And I dropped out after 2 weeks. And then I like went traveling.
Why did you not like it?
Huh?
Why did you not like it?
It was so business oriented, and I wanted to learn about science, the science of computers. That's what computer science is. And by that time I was already started like working in open source. I was already earning money, and so I started traveling around, and then I think I came to Brazil in that time also for quite a while. And then like the next year I went back and I said, okay, I'm going to become an artist now. So I studied multimedia graphics, but then I dropped out after 1.5 weeks. And then for that part of my life I was doing a bit of design work, and I gradually became like doing games development and games design, because I always loved video games. Actually, what got me learning programming was because I read in a magazine that video games are written in C++. And so I bought a big book when I was like 13 on C++, and like, poof, like this book. And I spent 6 months every day, come from school, study this book and like doing this thing. And I didn't realize actually at the time that C++ is the hardest programming language to learn. But it was actually very good because I jumped to the top. And so I spent many years writing C++ code. And then so I was always developing video games as one of my main focus. And also I was very much interested in media and media tools for artists and so on. And I was developing video games. I worked briefly, did a project for the Blender Institute, which is this 3D software. And then I was like moving around a lot. And then after that, the next year I decided, okay, I'm going to be an animator. So I studied animation and I dropped out after a week. So then I realized, okay, university is not for me at that point. And
Are you banned from all the computers in your university too, or no?
no, not really. I wasn't there long enough, Actually, I walked into university and I was like, this is cold. It's 3 different ones. It was first Kent, then I think it was London, and then Portsmouth. But it was like, I didn't really like the atmosphere, like it felt very oppressive and so on. And then I was also during this time like squatting buildings and making social centers. So in Europe, what we can do is occupy buildings and like make a place where people can come and do their projects. So I started like working on these different projects and so on. And okay, so I was like building up in my life towards this big project I was going to do. And it was like a lot of money involved, and it was like finally this is what we're going to do. And I invested actually a ton of energy and time, and was betting the whole house on this project, which ended up failing. And that was a massive, like, that was a real low point in my life. Like, fuck, I've wasted 6 years of my life programming video games for what, you know? And that really was like a period where I felt like at the bottom of the world, you know? And then I thought to myself, okay, I really want to do these projects that I want to do, and I'm not going to do video games for a while. I'm going to do something else now. What should I do? I started studying and reading about, and then I started like looking into chess and all these other things. I realized actually you can play poker for a living, and so I started studying poker for like a few months, and then I started actually like playing it full time for the next 2 years. But then after this 2 years, it started to get really repetitive. So poker players actually, when you play online, you play like dozens of tables, and it's like, it starts to become like bip, 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 you know, like very, lots of, like very, and it felt like I was working in a factory. There's no love, like you feel no love for the game, you know, like to play poker effectively, you have to study it and live it really. So then I like started playing less and less, and I started to actually, I took 2 months out just to study a few topics. Like, I was really interested to make digital life at one point, and so in this 2 months I actually did lots of maths exercises and tried to create this digital life and these crazy things that are for me, you know, not for anyone else, just for my enjoyment or whatever, self-discovery. And then I started to think about these decentralized distributed networks, and I started to realize, okay, we can actually build decentralized networks. There's different classes of algorithms that people are not using that can actually be really powerful and effectual. And then I actually started to think, actually, look, wait, we're trying to build decentralized networks to circumvent authority and power, but everybody's doing the wrong approach. We're trying to build perfect systems. What if we built imperfect systems that were right most of the time? They didn't have to be correct always. We could use Bayesian analysis, we can use different classes of mathematical algorithms, and we could actually build these very political systems. And then I started to think about poker, and I actually discovered that there's a class of algorithms in poker that you can use to do a distributed deal digitally without having a central party. Right. And in the poker world, it's a terrible situation. 90% of the poker market is controlled by this cartel of 4 poker sites: PokerStars, Full Tilt Poker, Cake Poker, and Absolute/Ultimate Bet. And because they have this cartel, they can charge these enormous fees. They can offer a very shoddy service. There's tons of scandals, you know. There's security problems, everything. All of the classic problems with monopolies exists in the poker market. And so I thought, okay, if I make this distributed poker software, I can put it out there and destroy this cartel. I could flatten this poker landscape. And so we could drive down these fees to zero. And that's when I started to look at, okay, what can I use as a payment system? And that is actually how I got involved in Bitcoin. And it was a friend of mine on like very like hackerish, we use these channels called IRC, which is like very, really hacker nerdy. You have to like type these commands and shit to get in there, right? And he was like this mathematician that I'd been speaking to. He works for like W3C. I never met him in real life. We were talking like over many months about like crazy ideas, like very, like way out there. And he sent me these links. And I went to this website, you know, this Bitcoin website, and it said, oh, this is a peer-to-peer decentralized money where you don't need central authority or any government. So I was like, oh man, there's hundreds of these projects on, people make these like projects all the time, and they're just silly, you know, like there's no basis for them. Like people get bored after a few days, and there's nothing like behind them. It's just words, you know, it's just talk. So I went away, and then a few days later I thought, okay, I'll come back and give this a fair shot. So I downloaded the source code. And you know how you can read Portuguese or English? I can read source code. It is a language that I can read. So I downloaded this source code and I started reading this program, how this works. And slowly things began to form and fit together. And then it reached a point and I was like, okay, that's very strange. And then suddenly like there's this big fire like everywhere. Like fuck, absolutely incredible. Everything that I was always imagining and I always wanted to do since a very young age is now possible with this system. It is now possible to do all of these epical and amazing things. And then I got really invested, and for the next like 3 days I was constantly talking about it to everyone. I went to hairdressers and so on, constantly talking about it, like, oh blah, have you had this system? And so I wasn't playing poker anymore, and I was down to my last $500, and I wasn't able to go more than a week without money, you know, like more than, you know, $500 is not a lot. And always like my family was putting a lot of pressure on me. Oh, Amir, you need to get a job, you need to get a house, get a car. It's like, fuck that, I don't want to have this normal life ever, you know? And it was always like, I could never ever, I've never done a day of work in my life. And I could never do a day of work in my life. It's always like, I always just had to write this open source code. Like even when it was bad for me and I tried to stop myself, it was just a habit, something that I could not do. So I really feel driven. It's a song I sung with my sister for Soper and Pippa. This song is written by Nina Paley. It's called Copying Is Not Theft. So it's okay. Copying isn't theft. Stealing a thing leaves one less left. Copying it makes one thing more. That's what copying's for. Copying isn't theft. If I copy yours, you have it too. One for me and one for you. That's what copies can do. If I steal your bicycle, you have to take the bus. But if I just copy it, there's one for each of us. Making more of a thing. That is what we call copying. Sharing ideas with everyone. That's why copying is fun.
Thank you. That was great.